A hall I saw, far from the sun. On the strand it stands, and the doors face north. Venom drops through the smoke vent down, for around the walls do serpents wind. I there saw wading through rivers wild treacherous men, and murderers too, and workers of ill with the wives of men. There Nidhogg sucked on the blood of the slain, and the wolf tore men. Would you yet know more? Nidhogg tells a tale of nebulous honor. It provides all of the framing of a professional duel, tainted, smeared over with the blood of many colorful fighting fanatics. No swing too abrupt, no boot too dirty. Prepare for a hail of flickering blades as warriors tumble in droves after every misstep or after every twist of the wrist. Let's not beat around the hog here, such duels were never fair. Armed or unarmed, fight or flight, whatever it took to reach the end of the hollowed corridor. It's a series full of rousing airborne kicks, flighty fencers' blades, roughneck spinal severing, and anything else you might find more commonplace at a particularly churlish Renaissance fair. Nidhogg 2 relates a similar story, a retelling so unchanged that it might be difficult to justify hearing all over again. Though that isn't to say that all of its value is lost to the mythology of its predecessor, but for a game that touts itself as a sequel, it only serves as a fresh coat of red paint on an already blood-slicked surface. Near every element of the original Nidhogg is here, though the silliness of these escapades has become more pronounced, due mostly to its drastically revamped art style. Where once these characters were faceless, pixelated tokens of sacrifice and wanton killing, and where once they stood but a blur of irradiated splotches, Nidhogg 2 has bumped up the fidelity quite a bit. Bulbous, clay-like fencers prance around environments that look strikingly gorgeous or strikingly grotesque, playing against sceneries of dripping lava, meat hovels, and bright, quaking forests. Some of the stages in Nidhogg 1 were difficult to piece together or even look at for a minute or two without wanting to barf, so these graphical updates are much appreciated. Not everyone is so easily swayed, however, and ever since Nidhogg 2's reveal, there's been somewhat of a bluster over the switch in artistic direction. The newer character models adorn a witless guise, their limbs waggle about stiffly, and overall feel less anchored to the poo-centric world in which they fight. It's apparent that these models were constructed via clearly defined rigs that don't animate as smoothly as what we saw in the original. Which is fair to some extent, these new goofballs are clearly more complex models. Unfortunately, this takes away some of the oomph of your strikes, when your opponent merely goes rigid after having been stabbed in the knees or anywhere else. Just the same default static animation. So it's not the goofy, cross-eyed looks of these bouncing baby homers that really causes the problem. In fact, their goopy mohawks and faces of anguish can be charming. But it's the character's lack of reactive animation that feels a bit less satisfying when you eventually thrust a blade between your friend's ribs. All of these nitpicks aside, the graphical changes are generally an improvement, and are more visually appealing than the practicality of the original's heavily pixelated art style. These shrieking Krylon puppets are adorable. The game has expanded upon its initially narrow focus on fencing weapons by doling out several new steel friends. A hefty claymore deals punishing laggard strikes, while the quickness of the dagger provides a short-range, murderous alternative. The inclusion of these weapons adds a pinch of diversity, forcing you to readjust your strategy on the fly, as you revive with a randomly determined instrument of war. Not a huge fan of the bow, however, which usually results in the wielder kiting around until they manage to either kill both the opponent or the blistering pace of the fight. Your lumpy avatar moves deftly in the face of imminent peril, and stringing together a wild series of punches when unarmed can prove just as deadly as the edge of a far-flung sword. Engage by using these always effective dives and sweeping kicks, and once your opponent lies helpless, feel free to stomp their juicy bits into the earth. Nidhogg 2 is just as ferocious as ever, and that unbridled violence is still its strongest angle. The game only really shines, of course, when playing with a friend. Even better if you're both in the same room, so you can take your anger out in a more physical realm. While dueling against the AI can still provide a modicum of fun, it lacks the emotion of a friendly bout between real humans. Fortunately, the game provides online multiplayer support, though keep in mind the game can still become a mechanical, tedious affair when not playing with a buddy. There's a certain bliss you feel from slaughtering the enemy you know, instead of the enemy you don't. There's some games that can get away with changing their look while leaving a majority of the gameplay unaltered. Nidhogg 2 just barely gets away with it. It all seems more like an excuse to get excited about the Nidhogg idea again, rather than try to improve upon it in any way other than the superficial. Character customization is neat, the few new weapons are neat, the game variables are neat, They're all neat changes that, had they been expanded upon, could have really pushed it far and above its predecessor. Yet it hasn't changed enough to differentiate itself from the original, especially for a game with such a tight, simple concept. But that doesn't mean it's not a raucous time in short bursts. Just don't expect anything dramatically different from the first game, and your purchase decision might rely entirely on your visual preferences or ability to gather together a group of horrible, like-minded individuals. If you don't already own either Nidhogg game in the series, Nidhogg 2 is the way to go, unless the art style distresses you beyond the point of recuperation. But if you already own Nidhogg 1, you can probably afford to wait until the sequel goes on sale.